In 1870, the 31-year-old man in Cleveland, Ohio, controlled 4% of America's oil refining capacity. By 1880, he controlled 90%. By 1904, he controlled 91% of oil production, 85% of final sales, and had created the template for every monopoly that exists today. His name was John D. Rockefeller, and the system he built, the corporate structures he invented, the monopolistic tactics he perfected, they didn't die when Standard Oil was broken up in 1911. They evolved, they spread, and they control your life right now in 2025. The gasoline you pump, the drugs you buy, the tech platforms you use, the food you eat, the banks you borrow from, every single one uses the Rockefeller playbook. Vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, regulatory capture, tax-exempt foundations that shape policy, and market dominance so complete that competition becomes impossible. Rockefeller didn't just build an oil empire, he built the architecture of modern corporate control. And you cannot escape it. Because the system isn't Standard Oil, the system is the method. And that method has been replicated by every dominant corporation for 150 years. Amazon uses it, Google uses it, Pfizer uses it, JP Morgan uses it. They all learned from the same blueprint, the Rockefeller blueprint. Control the supply chain vertically, eliminate competitors horizontally, capture the regulators, use philanthropy to buy legitimacy. And when the government finally breaks you up, make sure the pieces you control are worth more than the whole. Let me show you exactly how Rockefeller built this system, how he used it to become the richest man in history, how Standard Oil's breakup actually made him richer, and why 114 years after that breakup, you still live in the world Rockefeller designed. Because understanding the system isn't academic, it's survival. The system is designed to extract wealth from you and concentrate it at the top. And once you see how it works, you'll see it everywhere. John Davison Rockefeller was born July 8, 1839 in Richford, New York. His father was a con man who sold fake cancer cures. His mother was a devout Baptist. This combination, the con man's ruthlessness and the Baptist's moral certainty, would define Rockefeller's entire approach to business. He would destroy competitors without mercy while believing God had chosen him to organize industry for the betterment of mankind. This wasn't hypocrisy. This was genuine conviction that his monopoly was moral because it brought order to chaos and efficiency to waste. In 1859, oil was discovered in Titusville, Pennsylvania. The oil rush began. Thousands of prospectors flooded into western Pennsylvania to drill. Fortunes were made and lost overnight. It was chaos, boom and bust. Overproduction collapsed prices, then shortages spiked them. Rockefeller, who was 20 years old and working as a bookkeeper in Cleveland, saw opportunity, but not in drilling. Drilling was volatile, risky, dependent on luck. Rockefeller saw opportunity in refining, turning crude oil into kerosene for lamps. That was the real business. In 1863, Rockefeller invested $4,000 in his first oil refinery in Cleveland. Within 2 years, it was the largest refinery in Cleveland. But Cleveland had 30 refineries. Competition was fierce. Margins were thin. Most refineries operated at the edge of bankruptcy. This is where Rockefeller's genius emerged. He didn't try to compete on price. He tried to eliminate competition entirely. And he did it through a method that would become the foundation of corporate America. Vertical integration. Vertical integration means controlling every stage of production. Most refineries just refined oil. They bought crude from drillers, refined it, and sold kerosene to distributors. They controlled one step. Rockefeller decided to control all the steps. He bought the barrel-making factories, so he didn't have to buy barrels. He bought tank cars and railroads to ship his own oil. He bought his own warehouses for storage. He bought the distribution networks to sell directly to consumers. Every step that used to be a separate business generating profit for someone else, Rockefeller brought in-house. This gave him massive cost advantages. While competitors paid 25 cents per barrel from barrel makers, Rockefeller made his own for 15 cents. While competitors paid railroads to ship oil, Rockefeller owned the tank cars and negotiated secret rebates. The railroads paid him to ship his oil and charged competitors more. This wasn't just efficient, this was predatory. Rockefeller could sell kerosene at prices that put competitors out of business while still making profit. And that's exactly what he did. By 1870, Rockefeller created Standard Oil Company of Ohio. His refinery capacity had grown from one small plant to the largest refining operation in the world. But he still only controlled 4% of American refining. That wasn't enough. So Rockefeller launched the second phase of his strategy, horizontal integration. If vertical integration is controlling the entire supply chain, horizontal integration is buying or destroying every competitor. In 1872, Rockefeller initiated what historians call the Cleveland Massacre. Over 3 months, Rockefeller approached every refinery owner in Cleveland. He offered to buy their refineries. If they agreed, he paid fair market value and often hired them as managers. If they refused, he launched a price war. Rockefeller would drop the price of kerosene below cost. His competitors, who couldn't produce as cheaply, lost money on every sale. They had two choices: sell to Rockefeller Rockefeller or go bankrupt. Most sold, a few fought, they all lost. By the end of 1872, Rockefeller controlled 25 of Cleveland's 26 refineries. He went from 4% to 25% of American refining capacity in 3 months. This was the blueprint, offer to buy. If they refuse, destroy them economically. Then buy the ruins. This method would be used in every industry by every monopoly for the next 150 years. But Rockefeller wasn't satisfied with Cleveland. He wanted the entire country. Through the 1870s, Rockefeller expanded Standard Oil across America. He bought refineries in New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. He used the same tactics everywhere. Secret railroad rebates that made his shipping costs lower than competitors. Vertical integration that made his production costs the lowest. And ruthless price wars that destroyed anyone who refused to sell. By 1879, Standard Oil controlled 90% of America's refining capacity. 90%? That's not a business, that's a monopoly. But here's where Rockefeller's true genius emerged. He understood that monopolies faced 2 problems. First, they're illegal. The Sherman Antitrust Act was passed in 1890 specifically to break up monopolies like Standard Oil. Second, they're hated. The public despised Rockefeller. He was called a robber baron, a ruthless tyrant, the most hated man in America. Rockefeller needed a solution to both problems, and he found it: the trust. In 1882, Rockefeller's lawyers created the Standard Oil Trust. Here's how it worked. Standard Oil of Ohio couldn't legally own companies in other states, but a trust could. Rockefeller created a trust that held the stock of all Standard Oil companies. 41 shareholders, all Rockefeller and his close associates, controlled the trust. The trust controlled the companies. This was the first major corporate trust in American history, and it became the model for every trust that followed. Sugar Trust, Tobacco Trust, Steel Trust. All copied Rockefeller's structure. The trust allowed Rockefeller to control a nationwide monopoly while technically complying with state laws. But more importantly, it created a new legal entity. The trust wasn't a company, it was a holding company. It didn't produce anything, it just owned other companies. The structure would evolve into the modern corporation, the parent company that owns subsidiaries: Berkshire Hathaway, Alphabet, Meta, Amazon. They're all descendants of Rockefeller's trust. By 1904, Standard Oil controlled 91% of oil refining in America and 85% of final sales. Rockefeller was the richest man in the world. His net worth was $900 million, that's $25 billion in today's money. But that's just paper wealth. At his peak in 1913, Rockefeller was worth $400 billion, inflation-adjusted dollars. Richer than Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates combined. The richest individual in modern history. And he built that wealth through the system. Vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, legal structures that concentrated control. This was the system. But the public was turning against monopolies. In 1890, Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, making monopolies illegal. In 1906, investigative journalist Ida Tarbell published The History of the Standard Oil Company, exposing Rockefeller's tactics: secret railroad rebates, predatory pricing, crushing competitors. The outcry was enormous. In 1911, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil was an illegal monopoly and ordered it broken up into 34 separate companies. This should have been the end, the destruction of the system, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of the system's evolution, because when Standard Oil was broken up, Rockefeller still owned shares in all 34 companies. Standard Oil of New Jersey became Exxon, Standard Oil of New York became Mobil, Standard Oil of California became Chevron, Standard Oil of Indiana became Amoco, Standard Oil of Ohio became Sohio, later bought by BP. The breakup didn't destroy Rockefeller's wealth, it multiplied it. Before the breakup, Standard Oil stock was worth about $600 per share. After the breakup, the combined value of all 34 companies was worth over $2,000 per share. Rockefeller's wealth tripled. Why? Because the breakup forced each company to compete, which drove innovation and efficiency. And because breaking one monopoly into 34 companies that still dominated their regional markets wasn't really breaking up the monopoly, it was just reorganizing it. Today, most of those 34 companies have merged back together. Exxon and Mobil merged in 1989. Chevron bought Standard Oil of Kentucky and Gulf Oil. BP bought Amoco and Sohio. The Standard Oil monopoly that was broken up in 1911 has essentially reconsolidated into Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, and BP. The system broke itself up to avoid regulation, then quietly put itself back together over 100 years. But Standard Oil isn't even Rockefeller's most enduring legacy. The real legacy is the system itself. The methods, the structures, the playbook. Let me show you how it's being used right now. Amazon uses vertical integration exactly like Rockefeller. Amazon started as an online bookstore. Now it controls the entire supply chain. It owns the warehouses, the logistics network, the delivery trucks, the payment processing, the cloud infrastructure that hosts its competitors' websites. Amazon Web Services, AWS, generates $90 billion in annual revenue. That's more than Amazon's retail profit. Rockefeller controlled refineries, railroads, and distribution. Amazon controls retail, logistics, and cloud computing. Same playbook, different century. Amazon also uses horizontal consolidation. It buys competitors: Whole Foods, Zappos, Twitch, Ring, MGM Studios. Over 100 acquisitions. When it can't buy a competitor, it copies their products and undercuts their prices using data from its own marketplace. Third-party sellers report their sales data to Amazon. Amazon analyzes that data, identifies successful products, creates Amazon Basics versions, and promotes them above the original. This is the modern version of Rockefeller's price war: legal, barely regulated, and devastatingly effective. Google uses the trust structure. Alphabet is a holding company that owns Google, YouTube, Waymo, DeepMind, Verily, and dozens of other subsidiaries. It's the Standard Oil Trust, one parent company controlling multiple operating companies. This structure shields the parent from liability, allows tax optimization across jurisdictions, and makes regulatory breakup complicated because each subsidiary is technically separate. Pharmaceutical companies use Rockefeller's regulatory capture strategy. Rockefeller didn't just compete in markets, he shaped the rules. He lobbied for railroad regulations that favored Standard Oil. He worked with politicians to set standards for kerosene that his refineries could meet, but competitors couldn't. Today, pharmaceutical companies do the same. They fund the FDA through user fees. They lobby for patent extensions. They write the regulations they're supposedly regulated by. Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, they learned from Rockefeller. Control the regulators, and you control the market. The financial sector uses holding company structures. JP Morgan Chase is a holding company that owns Chase Bank, JP Morgan Investment Bank, and numerous subsidiaries. Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, all holding companies. When Dodd-Frank tried to regulate banks after 2008, the holding company structure made it nearly impossible. Which entity do you regulate, the parent or the subsidiaries? Rockefeller solved this problem in 1882. Banks copied the solution 100 years later. And then there's philanthropy, Rockefeller's final innovation. In 1913, Rockefeller created the Rockefeller Foundation with an initial gift of $250 million, over $7 billion today. The foundation funded medical research, education, and public health. On the surface, this was charity, Rockefeller giving back. But look deeper. The foundation allowed Rockefeller to avoid estate taxes. It gave him control over which universities received funding, which meant control over what was taught and researched. It bought him legitimacy. The man who destroyed thousands of competitors was now a philanthropist. The most hated man in America became a beloved benefactor. The Rockefeller Foundation funded the creation of modern medical education. It funded Johns Hopkins, University of Chicago, Rockefeller University. It established the model for medical schools that emphasized pharmaceutical interventions over holistic care. This isn't conspiracy theory, this is documented history. The foundation shaped American medicine to favor the pharmaceutical model. And pharmaceutical companies, many descended from Standard Oil's chemical divisions, profited enormously. Today, every billionaire uses the Rockefeller playbook. Bill Gates founded the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, $75 billion in assets. It funds global health initiatives, shapes WHO policy, and influences national governments. Mark Zuckerberg created the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Warren Buffett pledged most of his wealth to the Gates Foundation. These aren't just charity, they're tax avoidance, legacy building, and policy influence. Rockefeller invented the model. Modern billionaires perfected it. The Rockefeller family still exists, still influential. David Rockefeller, John D's grandson, died in 2017 at age 101. He was chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank, founder of the Trilateral Commission, one of the most powerful men in global finance for 50 years. The family's wealth, estimated at $11 billion, is spread across hundreds of trusts and foundations. The Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the Rockefeller Family Fund, the David Rockefeller Fund. They still shape policy, fund research, and influence politics 150 years after John D. started Standard Oil. And here's the most important part. The system isn't designed to be escaped. It's designed to be invisible until you're already trapped. You buy gasoline refined by ExxonMobil or Chevron, descendants of Standard Oil. You buy from Amazon, which uses Rockefeller's vertical integration and horizontal consolidation. You search on Google, structured as a trust like Standard Oil. You take pharmaceuticals developed through a medical system shaped by Rockefeller Foundation grants. You bank with institutions using Rockefeller's holding company structures. And your taxes fund regulations written by the industries being regulated just like Rockefeller designed. The system is self-perpetuating. It concentrates wealth. It eliminates competition. It captures regulators. And it uses philanthropy to buy legitimacy while avoiding taxes. This is the Rockefeller system. And it's not a conspiracy. It's just corporate structure. Legal, accepted, and replicated by every dominant company in every major industry. You cannot buy oil outside the descendants of Standard Oil. You cannot avoid Amazon's logistics network. You cannot opt out of pharmaceutical medicine shaped by Rockefeller grants. You cannot escape the banking system built on Rockefeller's holding company model. You live inside the system. And the system extracts wealth from you every single day and concentrates it at the top, exactly as Rockefeller designed it to do in 1870. Here's what makes Rockefeller different from other robber barons. Carnegie built steel mills. When he died, U.S. Steel remained, but Carnegie's personal control ended. Vanderbilt built railroads. When he died, the railroads continued, but fragmented. J.P. Morgan built financial empires. When he died, his partners carried on, but his personal dominance faded. But Rockefeller built a system, and systems don't die with their creators. They evolve, they adapt, they spread. Standard Oil was broken up in 1911, but the vertical integration model spread to every industry. The trust structure became the holding company. The regulatory capture became lobbying. The philanthropy became foundations. Every piece of Rockefeller's system was copied, refined, and embedded into corporate law, tax code, and regulatory frameworks. Rockefeller died in 1937, but his system became stronger after his death because it wasn't dependent on him. It was structural. Let me show you the mechanism. How the system extracts wealth from you. You need gasoline, you have a choice. Exxon, Chevron, BP, Shell. All of them are price-coordinated oligopolies descended from Standard Oil using its methods. You're not choosing. You're selecting between branches of the same tree. You need to buy products. You have a choice. Amazon, Walmart, Target. Amazon dominates through vertical integration. Walmart and Target must match its scale or die. Same system, different companies. You need internet search. Google has 92% market share. That's higher than Standard Oil's peak of 91%. But Google isn't considered a monopoly by regulators because it's free. You pay with data instead of money. Rockefeller would have loved this innovation. A monopoly so complete that users don't even realize they're paying. You need social media. Facebook has 3 billion users. Instagram, also Facebook. WhatsApp, also Facebook. You're not choosing platforms, you're choosing which meta property to use. Horizontal consolidation, exactly like Rockefeller. You need healthcare. You see a doctor trained in a system shaped by Rockefeller Foundation grants. You receive pharmaceuticals developed by companies using patents, regulations, and structures pioneered by Standard Oil's chemical divisions. You pay insurance companies using Rockefeller's corporate structures. Every step, extraction. Every choice, an illusion. The average American spends $4,000 per year on gasoline, $3,000 per year on Amazon, $5,000 per year on healthcare beyond insurance, $2,200 per year on internet and technology services. That's $2,200 per year flowing to companies using Rockefeller's system. Over a lifetime, that's $660,000 of wealth transfer, not to innovative startups or small businesses, to monopolistic corporations using 150-year-old tactics to eliminate competition and extract maximum profit. And you cannot escape it. You could refuse to buy gasoline, but you need to work, which requires transportation. You could refuse to use Amazon, but competitive pricing and convenience make it nearly impossible to avoid. You could refuse Google, but what alternative has 92% market share? You could refuse Facebook, but social connection is controlled by Meta's platforms. You could refuse pharmaceutical medicine, but medical licensing, insurance coverage, and cultural acceptance are all shaped by the Rockefeller system. This is Rockefeller's ultimate achievement. Not that he became the richest man in history, that he built a system that makes escape impossible. A system where every path leads back to consolidated corporate control. Where competition is crushed before it threatens the dominant players. Where regulators protect incumbents instead of consumers. Where philanthropy buys influence that perpetuates the system. This is the Rockefeller system, and you live in it whether you know it or not. But here's what Rockefeller understood that most people miss. The system isn't evil, it's efficient. Vertical integration reduces costs. Horizontal consolidation eliminates wasteful competition. Regulatory capture provides stability. Foundations fund genuine research. The system works. It delivers products cheaper, faster, and more reliably than chaotic markets. Standard Oil made kerosene affordable for average Americans. Before Standard Oil, kerosene cost 58 cents per gallon. After Standard Oil's efficiencies, 8 cents per gallon, an 86% price reduction. That's not exploitation, that's efficiency. Amazon delivers products in 2 days. Google answers every question in seconds. ExxonMobil produces gasoline at scale. Pfizer develops life-saving drugs. The system delivers value. The problem isn't that it doesn't work. The problem is that it concentrates wealth at the top while delivering efficiency at the bottom. You get cheap gasoline, fast shipping, instant information, and effective medicine. Rockefeller's heirs get trillions in accumulated wealth. Both things are true. So what do? How do you respond to a system you cannot escape? Three options. One, accept it. Understand that consolidation and monopoly are features of advanced capitalism, not bugs. Use the efficiencies they provide. Buy from Amazon. Use Google. Accept that wealth will concentrate. Two, resist it. Support antitrust enforcement. Buy from small businesses even when it costs more. Use alternatives even when they're inferior. Vote for politicians who promise to break up monopolies. Make the system less efficient in exchange for less consolidation. Three, understand it and position accordingly. If you cannot escape the system, benefit from it, buy stock in the companies that dominate. Exxon, Chevron, Amazon, Google, Pfizer, JP Morgan. If the system extracts wealth from everyone and concentrates it in these companies, own these companies. This is what Rockefeller did. He owned Standard Oil while everyone else bought its products. He extracted wealth from the system he built. You can do the same, not at his scale, but proportionally. Own the extractors instead of being extracted from. This isn't investment advice, this is pattern recognition. The Rockefeller system has concentrated wealth for 150 years. It will continue concentrating wealth because it's embedded in corporate law, tax code, and regulatory structures. Fighting it is noble but exhausting. Escaping it is impossible. Understanding it and positioning within it is pragmatic. John D. Rockefeller died in 1937 at age 97. He lived long enough to see Standard Oil broken up, reconsolidate, and spread its methods across every industry. He lived long enough to see his foundation reshape American medicine and education. He lived long enough to see his grandchildren positioned at the top of American finance and industry. He built a system that outlived him by a century and will outlive us all. The system is vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, corporate trusts, regulatory capture, and philanthropic influence. It started with Standard Oil. It spread to steel, railroads, sugar, tobacco, then to automobiles, electronics, pharmaceuticals, technology. Now it dominates every sector of the economy. And you cannot escape it, you can only understand it. Rockefeller said, competition is a sin. Most people hear that as greed, but Rockefeller meant it theologically. Competition is wasteful. It duplicates effort. It destroys capital. Consolidation is righteous. It creates efficiency. It serves consumers through lower prices. Monopoly isn't theft. It's the natural end state of efficient markets. This was Rockefeller's worldview, and he built a system to enforce it. 150 years later, we live in that system. Amazon eliminates retail competition. Google eliminates search competition. Meta eliminates social media competition. Exxon, Chevron, and BP control oil. Pfizer, Merck, and J&J control pharmaceuticals. JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Citi control banking. The consolidation Rockefeller started has reached its logical conclusion. The end state isn't thousands of competitors. It's 3 to 5 dominant players in every industry, all using Rockefeller's playbook. And the consolidation continues. Every year, fewer companies control more market share. Every year, barriers to entry get higher. Every year, the system gets harder to escape. This is the Rockefeller system, not Standard Oil, the method. And the method is eternal because it works. If this video showed you a system you'd never seen before, if you understand now that the corporate structures controlling your life were built by one man 150 years ago, subscribe to this channel. Because understanding the system is the first step. You cannot escape the Rockefeller system, but you can see it. And seeing it changes everything. John D. Rockefeller created a system you cannot escape. Vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, corporate trusts, regulatory capture, philanthropic influence. That system is the modern economy, and you live in it every single day. Welcome to Rockefeller's world.